All right, I'm back. All right, we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 1, verses 6 through 8, day 2. All right, so first and foremost, please bear with me. I'm trying to formulate and get used to doing these videos here at home, and with Yah's will, we will be getting better and better with these videos. So, with that being said, day 2, again, I'm going to start off with reading the verses in the New Living Translation and then going back over each one of them in the King James Version. This may be slightly different because it's not going to be that long. I'm going to actually um, pretty much join verses 6 and 7, and and we'll go from there. So again, verse 6, all right, New Living Translation, and it says, then Elohim said, let there be a space between the waters to separate the waters of the heavens from the waters of the earth. And that is what happened. Elohim made this space to separate the waters of the earth from the waters of the heavens. Verse 8, it says, Elohim called the space sky, and evening passed, and morning came, marking the second day. All right, first and foremost, we're going to go over some words. All right, we're going to look at the Strong Concordance. All right, we're going to go over all of the words for all 3 verses, and then we're going to go through that. So, first and foremost, the first word I want to look at is here. It says in verse 1, it says, let there be a space between the waters. Okay. King James Version, it says, and Elohim said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Okay. So the waters from the waters. All right. The firmament, when it says the space between the waters, is saying the firmament. King James again, it says, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, that let it divide the waters from the waters. Verse 7, it says, let me click on it, and it says, King James Version, and Elohim made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. So, like I said, the first word we're going to look at is firmament. All right, and that's the concordance H7549. And the Hebrew word for that is rakia. All right, rakia. All right. And it says from H7554, properly an expanse. So firmament is an expanse. That is the firmament, or apparently visible arc of the sky. Visible arc of the sky. And it goes back to firmament. Visible arc of the sky. All right, so let's go a little bit deeper, okay, to H7554. Hebrew word, the root word is rakah. All right, the primitive root, to pound the earth as a sign of passion. All right, by analogy, to expand. All right, by hammering, a physical thing. By implication, to overlay with thin sheets of metal. All right. Beat, make broad, spread abroad, forth over, out into plates. Okay. Stamp and stretch. All right. So Very interesting there. All right. We we're talking about some things that people have been arguing about all the time, and a big lie that's been going on. But a lot of people don't like to believe they've been lied to. All right. So, with that being said, let's go a little bit deeper. We're going to go back to, actually, we're going to look at, before we go back to, we're going to look at the word by analogy to expand. Okay. To expand. So, I'm going to click on expand. We're going to look up the definition for expand. All right. And the definition says, increase in size, become large, enlarge, swell, become distended, dilate, inflate, balloon, puff out, puff up, lengthen, stretch, thicken, fatten, fill out. All right. Um, and then if we go and look at the second round of words or meaning, it says grow, become, make large, become, make bigger, increase in size, increase in scope, extend, augment, broaden, widen, develop, um, um, diversify, multiply, add to, build up, scale up, branch out, um, broaden one's horizon, extend one's operation. Okay. So, again, what we've read so far about the firmament, which is the expanse, okay, or expand. Okay. Let's look at what it says again. Okay. By analogy to expand, it says by hammering, by implication, to lay out with thin sheets of metal. All right. And before that, it says to pound the earth as a sign of passion. Sounds like a physical thing. All right. Um, I'm not one to say that we haven't done something that they say they have done, but I believe the Bible is the word of Yah, and Yah's word is truth. So that's something for us to know, because a lot of us don't like to think that the powers that be will lie to us in a large scale. Okay, so with that being said, we're gonna go back, and then I guess I'll look up the word expanse. All right, as well. All right, and it says area, stretch, sweep, track, uh, swath, plane, field, belt, region, sea, carpet, blanket, sheet, breath, range, spread, reach, space, extend. Okay, vastness. All right, so very important to get and understand what the firmament is, or what it says in verse 6. It says, let there be a space in between, okay, the waters, to separate the waters, um, separate the waters of the heavens from the waters of the earth. Okay, a space in between. Okay, all right, and it said here an area, stretch, sweep, track, so on and so forth. All right. So we know what the firmament means. We got the Hebrew word and the definitions. Okay. So let's go to the definitions, or the Hebrew word, the strong concordance for divide. Okay. And it says again in verse 7. All right. It says, and Elohim made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament, and from the waters which were above the firmament. Okay, so divide. All right, we're gonna look up divide. which is pretty self-explanatory. The Hebrew word is badal. All right, the primitive root word to divide in various sense, literally or figuratively, separate, distinguish, differ, select, etc. Make, put, or make difference. All right, put difference. All right, um, divide, sunder. All right, make separate. All right, make separation, serve out utterly. Okay, so again, we know to divide, to separate something. Okay, um, from one thing from another. Okay, from waters of the earth and waters of the heavens. All right, they're separating. All right, the waters. All right, that's what they're saying here. Okay, separating the waters. All right, and then we're going to look at the word heaven. All right, verse 8, King James Version, and it says, "And Elohim called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day." So we're looking at heaven. All right. The Strong's Concordance of heaven is H8064. Heaven. All right. The Hebrew word is shamaim. All right. Shamaim. All right. Is the Hebrew word for heaven. Shamaim. All right. And then it says the second form being dual of an unused singular, okay? And it says from an unused root meaning to be lofty, all right? To be lofty, all right? And it says the sky, all right? The sky, our sky is a heaven, all right? The sky, and it says as aloft, the dual, perhaps uh, alluding to the visible arc in which the clouds move. All right. Again, it says the visible arc in which the clouds move, as well as to the higher ether, okay, where the celestial bodies revolve. All right. So the higher ether, where the celestial bodies revolve. All right. Air, all right, is also heaven. All right, astrologer, heaven, heavens. All right, so Shamaim is also in the sky, our sky. Okay, and then heavens are also where the celestial, okay, the celestial bodies, okay, the sun, the moon, all of those things, they move. Okay, now it's a lot more to that than what they've taught us in school. All right, so we're gonna and I just want to say this, the distinction again. It says the visible arc in which the clouds move are heavens, which is our air. Okay, and then it says um, as well as to the higher ether where the celestial bodies revolve. All right, so above, all right, the actual physical thing that was hammered and laid out like sheets of metal. All right. So those are the words that I want us to understand while we go through, all right, these references. All right. So let's see what we got here. All right. Um, we're gonna look at these references of stretched out. All right, stretched out. All right, stretched out. It says, um, let there be space between the waters." All right, space between the waters. Um, Stretched out. We're going to look at, we're going to start off with Zechariah 12 and 1. All right, 12 and 1. And it says, this message concerning the fate of Yasharal or Israel came from Yahuwah. This message is from Yahuwah, who stretched out the heavens, laid the foundations of the earth, and formed the human ruach or human spirit. All right, so they're being specific here, saying who stretched out the heavens. All right, so he stretched them out. All right, so he physically stretched out the heavens. Okay, when we think about the firmament, that space, okay, that expands to hammer with passion, okay, all right, he did that. It's a physical act, is what they're explaining here. All right, but also, he said, let there be space. All right, let's see what else they got. All right, this is along the same lines. Job 26, 7 through 8, and it says, Elohim stretched out the northern skies over empty space and hung and hangs the earth on nothing. He wrapped the rain in his thick clouds, and the clouds don't burst with the weight. All right, so emphasis on stretching out those heavens. All right. Again, along the same lines, and he says, Job 26:13, and it says, his ruach or his spirit made the heavens beautiful, and his power pierced the gliding serpent. The gliding serpent. So that's pretty interesting. But again, emphasis on his ruach or his spirit made the heavens. Okay. All right. I'll click on another one. Again, here we go. Psalms 19 and 1, and it says, the heavens proclaim the glory of Elohim. The skies display his craftsmanship. That means he went to work, right? He went to work. All right. So, do one more. Let's go to Jeremiah 51:15. And it says, and Yahuwah made the earth by his power, and he preserved it by his wisdom. With his own understanding, he stretched out the heavens. All right, so I think we pretty solidified that he physically stretched out a physical arc, okay, in the sky to separate these waters from the waters. All right, these waters from the waters. All right, so let's go down to the references or the precepts of divided. All right, divided. All right, and we're going to look at Proverbs chapter 8. I'll pull it up here. Chapter 8, verse 28 through 29, and it says, I was there when he set the clouds above, when he established springs deep in the earth. I was there when he set the limits of the sea so they would not spread beyond their boundaries, and when he marked off the earth foundation. And when he marked off the earth's foundation. Okay, so this is referring to the division. Okay, So it says in verse 28, it says, when he established the springs deep in the earth. All right. 29, it says right here, it says, and I was there when he set the limits. Okay. He's dividing, setting the limits of the sea so they would not spread beyond their boundaries of earth, the sea and earth, right? Dividing, okay? Um, Dividing it up, all right? Um, and it says, and when he marked off the earth's foundations, so he's dividing things here, all right? Um, uh, give you a few references of dividing. Once again, let's go to Genesis 1 and 9, and it says, dividing things up, and it says, then Elohim said, let the waters beneath the skies flow together into one place so dry ground may appear, and that is what happened. All right, separating the waters from the ground, okay, the earth. All right, Genesis 1 and 11, and it says, and Elohim said, let the land sprout with vegetation, every sort of seed bearing plant, and trees that grow seed bearing fruit. The seeds will then produce the kinds of plants that the trees from which they came from. So dividing things up, and they are producing their own thing. Okay. So with this being said, like I said, this video is going to be pretty short. All right. In verse in verse oh, let's go ahead and go into verse 8. And it says, and Elohim called the firmament heaven, or the space sky. All right. And the evening and the morning were the second day. All right. So again, we're talking about wordplay here, and the powers that be use wordplay, and we don't typically look too deep into it. We say sky is sky, and we don't look at it as heaven. So to know what actually distinguished as heaven, all right, is very important, especially with the prophecies um, in in the Bible. Okay, when we read in the prophets and we're reading throughout just the rest of the Bible, when we hear heaven, we have to understand. Okay, all right, um, what he means by heaven and aloft. Okay, um, that is very deep. We will get into that. All right, because when we look for something um, that is wrong and that has been taught to us, we're going to be looking for something that we shouldn't be looking for, and we'll be lost. And he says we perish by the lack of knowledge. Okay, so this is something that we need to know. All right, all right, and then it says, and um, and then it says an evening. Oh, and it says an evening and morning were the second day. Were the second day. Okay, again, evening, morning, second day. All right, and the way we should look at it is, I'll get into that in another one because it is good and it is deep. So the second day for us is Monday, all right, not Tuesday, all right. Sunday being the first day, as we saw in the last lesson, and then Monday is the second day, all right. Um, to really, I did read that stint in the first day lesson, and it says they go by numbers for the days, and typically not, you know, Sunday, Monday, so on and so forth. And there's a reason for that, and we'll get into that as well. It's a little deeper information because those words are referring to other things that we don't know or that is hidden from us. So we'll get into that as well. But with that being said, going back up to the top, all right, um, verse 6, and it says again, just to recap, and it says, then Elohim said, this is New Living Translation, let there be a space, a space, a space between the waters. Okay. I said that more than once because I'm going to go into that definition. Space, a space. Okay. Let there be a space. So we know a space is the firmament. Okay. Because in King James it says the firmament. Okay. In King James it says Elohim said, let there be a firmament. In New Living Translation it says, let there be a space. Okay, so what's the definition of space? All right, space is room, expanse, extend, um, capacity, area, volume, spaciousness, scope. Okay, latitude. All right, expansion, margin, leeway, play. Okay, a space. So the firmament is just not a flat thing, it is a space. Boom, boom, a space. So we got air here, our air, and then a firmament, what's in between my two hands, and then we have more heavens. All right, a space. All right, again, New Living Translation, it says, let there be a space between the waters to separate the waters of the heavens from the waters of the earth. In King James, I'm sorry, and it says, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." All right. So this lesson, all right, um, is to give insight of truth. Okay, because we all know Yah, the Most High's word is truth, and they will lie to us. So the word says it, all right, and that's what we should believe, and not the narrative of what we've been taught. So therefore, if you want to look into that deeper, the word is the word. Go into your Bible, look into the concordance, look up the definitions, the Hebrew words, and it is there and you'll see it for yourself. So again, thank y'all for joining me today. Day 2, okay, of the creation. Let there be um, a firmament or a space between the waters to divide the waters from the waters from the heavens, and the waters from the earth. Again, I'll see y'all next time. I'm out.